Welcome to the International Conference of Secular Alcoholics Anonymous from Toronto, Canada, August 24th to August 26th, 2018.
My name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic.
Hi, Jeb.
And I normally introduce myself as my name is Jeb, and I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's I qualify, and that's who I am. And I used to say, I'm grateful to God, the fellowship and program of 8 Alcoholics Anonymous, and to myself for the degree of sanity, serenity, security, sobriety, sensitivity, spirituality, sobriety, self-efficacy, and then I go on to happiness, joy, peace, freedom, other things like that. But I love the S word alliteration. But now I just say, I'm grateful to the fellowship and program and to myself for the degree of sanity and so forth, for what I have today. And it's a cumulative sort of thing. What I'm doing today, and you'll hear me say the same thing over and over, is it's just my experience. Come a long way from where I was a few years back. One of the things that I heard when I came to my first AA meeting, at 2.5 years of sobriety, was that the real ABCs are accept, begin, and continue. And I've kind of heard that in this last talk. I need to learn to continue to use the tools that are laid at my feet, that are laid out there, and whatever order works for me. So, this is it. So important to me. I also heard is no one person speaks for AA as a whole, whether it's Dr. Bob or Bill or Jimmy Barrett. My real name is James Earl Barrett, but I go by Jeb, and I may tell you why that later on. I only know what I know. It's my experience, strength, and hope. I can't be hiding behind somebody else's story. As you know, I had a sponsor in Montana who said, Jim, you need to quit hiding behind the big book. You need to share precisely how it works for you. Your own experience, strength, and hope. That's what people are going to learn from. Learn from by example. And so scattered throughout this will be some key things from the literature for me. And we used to hear at meetings, or I did, take what you like and leave the rest. But I found out this really take what I can use and leave the rest. It's like eating something and digesting this stuff. It gives me the kind of energy that I need, and getting rid of the other stuff. So, this is what is really bottom line for me. There's a solution, and almost no one likes the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for a successful consummation. It was a few years before I looked up consummation in the dictionary to see that it means fulfillment, and it does in any usage. But we saw it really worked in others, who we come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we've been living it, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved. There was nothing left for us to do but pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet and begin to use them, and then continue to use them. Now, there's that accept, begin, continue. So important to me. I've known so many good examples in AA and good examples of bad examples. And I didn't know I was going to say this, but why I'm so passionate about this is my partner committed suicide 34 years ago because he was told, if you don't get God, you're going to die. I don't know if any of you ever heard that. I'm going to tell you the other thing that I have to say. My last drink of alcohol was on August 25th, 1978. So, and thanks to you, and I'm having a hard time getting away from the drama of that last drunk, and the shame and remorse that I felt the next morning. But it's a part of my history. It's a part of who I am. So I have to keep doing what I'm doing if I want to get what I got and keep it. Alrighty. But first, I love this quote from John Lennon. When I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told them they didn't understand life. How often do we ever hear anybody coming into AA, do they get to hear, you get to be happy? That's what I think it's all about. I think of that first page of A Vision for You, where it talks about terror, bewilderment, and frustration and despair. And it says, unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. I always, with newcomers, say that's the first person you need to read. You can read a little bit into the next page before it goes on a bunny trip, but there's real wisdom there. I happen to be a big book thumper. I think it's got some of the greatest wisdom for me to take and digest and use that is ever given to me. I identify with so much. So, quotes, there are a few this was the other piece that helped me so much. Faced with the fundamentalism in some of the AA in Montana that I experienced, this thing from page 199 in Asbale sees it. There are few absolutes inherent in the 12 steps. Most steps are open to interpretation based on the experience and outlook of the individual. I use that as a defense against the steps are in order for a reason. Even though I can use that as a process of getting to different action and choices. Consequently, the individual is free to start the steps at whatever point he can or will. If he, well, I left out some little stuff in there, you notice that. He will relax and practice as many of the steps as he can. He is sure to grow spiritually. 2 years ago in Austin, I did a workshop called Spirituality Minus Religion. When I was working on that thing, actually an outline for a book, I was sharing that with somebody out, not in the fellowship, and she said to me, I was calling it spirituality without religion. And she said, I know you well enough that you mean spirituality minus religion. For me, that means today, letting go of old ideas. Confession, I've worked for churches for, about 65 years, I think, in some capacity as a musician, as a religious education director, and so forth. And I saw that really distracted me from reality and doing what I can do today and trying to help myself and others. The only requirement for AA membership is an honest desire to stop drinking, and that was honesty with myself. You know, the morning after my last drunk, I conceded to my innermost self that in other words, I quit lying to myself that I was alcoholic, that if I was to drink again, I would die. And my mantra, daily mantra, for the first 2.5 years was to drink is to die, to drink is to die. I said to the universe on the morning of August 26, 1978, take away the bottle, take away the craving, and make me open to whatever help I need. But see, and I really felt bad about myself. I felt disconnected. I felt isolated. I experienced that terrible bewilderment and frustration and despair. Now, that line at the bottom is when we started our secular AA meeting in 2013 in Denver. We looked at all these alternate versions of the 12 steps to see if any of them had anything to do with the process that Bill describes in the book before he or Sam Shoemaker wrote down those 12 on pages 59 and 60. And I came up with this, or we came up in this initial group with, my life is not the life I long for, and I concede to my innermost self that I'm powerless to change for the better on my own. You know, I know how to get along without liquor, but you have even a sufficient substitute? Yes, and it's vastly more than that. It isn't belief in God. It's a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous, and their life would have meaning and make lifelong friends. That promise hit me in the beginning. I heard someone else say, Vera, I'm a reader. And that is one of the assets. But it was also one of my escapes, one of my addictions to escape what was going on inside and what was going on here. But fortunately, I bought my big book. the first night I went to my first AA meeting in Helena, and I started reading. I wanted to find what are these people talking about? Because so I identified so much with that crowd. I called my mother when I got home from that AA meeting. I said, Mom, guess what? I finally found a group of people who give me permission to not drink. Imagine that. Because it was every place else in my life. And that, I was hooked. I was hooked there. I didn't really know what they're talking about. I have to let you know also that I went through various stages in my belief and non-belief. Before I came to AA, many transitions. By the time I made it to AA, I was already identifying as a non-deist. Seminary did that to me. But I really understood that if it's not, I had to find reality. Okay, now where are we? I love that thing, the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. And Bill talks about some of the stuff in the 12 and 12 too that I relate to, that, the transformation. And I have in my living room a wingback platform rocker that was my grandmother's. When I was 6 years old, I was sitting on her lap and I said, Grandma, what does spiritual mean? And she said, this wise old woman, she was much younger than I am now when she said this, she says it means non-material. The things you cannot see, the things you maybe can't touch. I also have a 1939 dictionary that was my father's. I was born in 1939, and that's a precious treasure. What is the first definition for spiritual in that dictionary? Non-material. Thank you, Grandma. That has been with me through all of the things that I've done in dabbling with this and seeking that, looking for answers. And so I've never had any problem with the idea of spiritual, except when other people use it, I don't know what they're talking about. Unless I ask them, what do you mean by that? Or they say, I believe. I say, what do you mean by that? Well, I don't know unless we take time to talk. That quote from William Paley that Bill says is from Herbert Spencer has always been important to me. And it doesn't mean I have to drink the Kool-Aid and swallow exactly whatever other people's are, but I need to find a process that helps me to tap into an unsuspected inner resource, which people call different things. I don't know anybody in AA who says, they call it God consciousness. They call it capital G-O-D. I like it with adding the extra O in there. Good. Page 88, that thing, has always been on my mind. We alcoholics are undisciplined, therefore we allow what I call my inner wisdom and memories to discipline us in the simple way just outlined. I apologize for the still wheeze in there, but that's kind of, quoting the literature. That's the other thing that we found when we started our meeting in Denver, is that we had been hiding individuals behind the we thing. We did this, we did that, and I learned a long time ago that could mean that some of us are doing this and some of us are doing that and whatever. It doesn't mean anything. Just as bad as hiding behind the big book. So, when we go through this, you're going to find that our version eventually turned into I, because that's the way I have to share the program. I only can be responsible for sharing my experience, how it works for me, not somebody else's. I don't go to many regular AA meetings anymore, whatever you want to call them. I call them prayer meetings. But about 2 months ago, I went to the Southeast Aurora Club, and I heard a guy there share that I'd never seen before. And he said, when I read the big book, I have to change all of the we's to they. And that's to put in perspective that is their experience, strength, and hope. And thank goodness they have recorded that so I can see if that example might fit for me and then duplicate it. There's nothing more flattering than imitation. And I could go off on a musical example of that, but I won't right now. That's another lecture. Okay, the spiritual life is not a theory. We need to live with it. I love the 12 and 12 too, even though it was written at a very religious or superstitious point in Bill's life, and you're dealing with depression or whatever other things we know about. But AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which practices a way of life can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to be happily and usefully whole. I don't hear other people say that in meetings, but I always do. Because I also had a sponsor said, if you didn't hear what you need to hear in the meeting, it's probably because you didn't say it. I want to say, I was in a little bit of a meeting last night here, and I had no desire or need to share anything because I was hearing already what I needed to hear. There is such good diversity and honesty of recovery in secular AA, in my experience, and I love that. Also, the 12 and 12, and this is part of why I'm here today, is that that only step one, where we made a 100% admission we're powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with perfection. That's a promise. I hear people say, must be. No. That's maybe when we come to acceptance, we're doing that. But then the remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals toward which we look, and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. 2 years ago, I wasn't at the point of knowing how to do that. Therefore, earlier this year, we started in our young group in Denver a little closed meeting or workshop or class on living the 12 steps on a daily basis. And the idea is I wanted help in developing this checklist to see if I really am progressing, and they can see if they're really progressing. And I've been looking at that for a long time. Am I doing any better this year than I did 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 months ago or 10... And I want to see progress, because I firmly believe, after hearing this talk on recovery capital, that I need to be taking my inventory, looking in the mirror, and am I any happier and any more joyful? Am I any more free today than I was yesterday or 20 years ago or when Norman killed himself? I'm a hell of a lot better off today. I've learned a lot from all this. And this promise of the joy of living, and it's where it says good living later in this chapter, I think, is the theme of AA's 12 step. And action is the key word. Here we begin to practice all 12 steps on a daily basis so that we and those around us can find emotional sobriety. I don't know about you, but when I go to when I used to go to a lot of meetings, like 2 a day, sometimes 3 a day, I didn't hear a lot of emotional sobriety. And sometimes I've come away not feeling much of that. But I think that is a reward, is to find that. And I look back to in Helen as someone saying, this is a feelings disease. So when I talk about, and this is just my stuff, when I talk about the disease, I'm thinking dis-ease, discomfort, and because without, I thought for a long time about the sense of ease and comfort comfort that comes from taking that first drink of alcohol, or some other escape or fix. And of course, we have probably heard this too or read it. We really have a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. For me, that means always trying to think about what I can bring to the occasion rather than take out of the occasion. Out of that wonderful story, is it he who loses his life? If you're not a big book thumper like me, well, I remember I used to facilitate a group or whatever, provide a group across from a high school in Missoula, Montana, and one of the gals in there said, we don't really need to read the book as long as we go to meetings where Jim was present, because that's what they called me then, Jim, because what was I doing? I was quoting the book all the time, and that's when Roger was saying, Jim, you need to quit hiding behind the big book. You need to share how it worked for you. And I'm not always good at that, because I still like to quote the book and show how much I know. But really what I know is my experience, and that can I really talk about. And this morning here on 85, I don't have to read everything. Okay, so this is the process as I understand it and try to live it. Remembering that the 1939 book is a chronicle of experience, strength, and hope. Bill Wilson tried to represent the various things early members were doing to stay sober, but also added prophetic thoughts, suggestions, and sources. Well, his outline of the 12 steps, of course, people hadn't done those things because they didn't have the book yet. and if I read the text, especially 60 to 88, it kind of outlines the process as I understand it, then we begin to see that there's a lot more. That's maybe where the precise directions are of how we do this stuff, or it's at least a suggestion of what they did, what claimed he did. I don't really care. It's guided me. But there's no reason to suggest it or assume that anyone did all the things outlined in the suggested program of recovery. Roger also said I shouldn't read the book without a dictionary, and I really needed to read the stories looking for how and where people did any of the stuff that's outlined in those 12, that outline of 12. The only one that I found that really shows any suggestion of it is Bill's story. So probably he could have written I, see there, but he's not here to ask. There I go again. Take what you can use and leave the rest in all this. So, finding the power through the step process, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than the body. I've heard that several times today in different ways. And, what is undisciplined? I didn't learn from my experience. So, continuing to go through my own life experience and so forth helps me to learn from my life lessons that I kind of missed, and so I repeated the same stuff all the time. Get to be happy, but it does take work, desire, intention, and planning. So we go through this. There are 12 steps I consider for tapping into unsuspected inner resource. But before that happened, it had to get my attention the morning after August 25th, 1978. I had that real positive desire. And that was when I made contact with an unsuspected, that inner voice that said, you're fucked if you drink again. You're going to lose everything. I learned enough. I had so much shame that next morning about what I'd become and what I'd done. That is a voice that still is there. And this is, so my experience, each step does tap, or helps me to tap into more innate power. And of course, dictionary again, the definition that I stick with is a step is a course of action. And I think everybody has a different, his own or her own glossary of terms or own definitions that somehow they feel right, and that's where I've been for quite a while. So we're coming out of it with the purpose of the 12-step checklist is to measure progress. It's a checkup. How am I doing today? What questions can I ask myself? And then remember that all successful men and women, and men, have a plan. That's something I heard in my first year or so in AA. And where did that plan come from? It comes from me out of the fourth step, the kind of person that my past and other examples help me to see, it will make me happy with myself. What kind of a person does my inner or higher self, or whatever it is, want me to be so I can feel good at myself at the end of the day and tomorrow and so forth. And then I'm a fanatic about doing the morning, on awakening, think about the 24 hours ahead before we begin. We ask that our thinking be divorced from self-pity, dishonesty, self-seeking motives. Fortunately, I do hear few people say that, because that's where I started using the directions for AA. What initially was, I was looking for some clear directions. How do you do these steps? And that 84 or 86 or 88 gave me some pretty clear things of what to do throughout the day. And of course, that thing, of pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. Oh yes, and the other piece is we say to ourselves, to ourselves throughout the day, thy will be done, or your will be done. He doesn't say anything out there, but it's talking to myself, my higher self. That's it. So surrender to that. That's another topic. Okay. We know the first step in the big book, but the real first step for me is what Bill says, when we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic, Well, so we came up with this. I concede to my innermost self that I'm alcoholic, that on my own I am powerless to confront and resolve my addiction. That means I need you and other people in this recovery movement, in AA, whatever, and especially secular. Or another version, I don't know who wrote that. I don't think it was me. My life is not the life I longed for, and I concede to my innermost self that I'm powerless to change for the better on my own. That's it too. But it's I'm only power. That's the other piece for me. I love the doctor's opinion. Yeah, I heard that as somebody quoting it at the first meeting, the allergy of the body coupled with the obsession of the mind. And so that I knew why I hadn't had a drink for 2.5 years. There's two pieces. My daily mantra is to drink is to die. And my last drunk, I gave myself permission to have one drink at 5 days of sobriety, earlier in that week of August. And because I lied to myself. I lied to everybody. I said Bonnie and Skip and Bonnie would be offended if I didn't drink and toast them at their wedding, wedding reception. And I ordered a tall glass. I ordered Scotch on the rocks. So they took a glass about that tall, that big around, the sort that I drank Singapore slings in when I was in the Navy, filled it with ice and then filled it with Scotch. And I drank it, and then I changed my mind. I decided to have one more. And it was off to the races. That was probably about 12 ounces, the one. I mean, that was one drink, but I have no idea. That was why I was such a mess that night, is I lied to myself, and I picked up that drink. So for me to, just don't pick up that first drink. I hadn't done that. I hadn't surrendered to that. That concept has really stuck with me. Put the plug in the jug, and I could do it. The next day, and the next day, and next day. Each day I said, I didn't drink today. And I always thought that I couldn't live without alcohol. And now I sound like I'm quoting the book, but that's the stories that I heard and related to. But I was trying to do it alone. But today, my first step practice is always to remember, never forget that last drunk, the last year, the last few years of drinking, about what it did to me, but also what it did for me, leading up to that point where I had no control, felt I had no choice, and so forth. And am I convinced? This is the question that I asked myself. Am I convinced that I'm powerless to alcohol if I pick up that first drink, or I'm willing to start lying to myself again? That's just my personal thing to see if I'm progressing or I'm regressing. Then going on to step 2, and it's the idea of tapping into the power of, well, it's more of its honesty too, of identification and hope. When I came to my first AA meeting, that's where I received the gift of hope. Not belief, but hope. And that is so important to me. I learned to, and so today, present tense also, I learned to trust and hope that a new course of action, practice of these 12 steps, in a supportive fellowship, can and will restore me to sanity. If they can do it, maybe I can also. I identified with others, and I still do, with other people's stories. And I suddenly felt at home, a part of, and connected. That first AA meeting, at 2.5 years of sobriety, I'd come home, and I've never gone away. So, am I continuing? I asked myself, am I continuing to attend meetings to learn from others and my own experience? If I'm not sharing in meetings, I'm not hearing myself talk. If I'm not sponsoring, I'm not hearing myself talk about myself instead of other people. Talk about how it works for me, what is necessary, what has worked today, what worked yesterday, and I need to continue doing. Am I at least trying to use the tools provided? I love that in the 12th step, or, tried to practice these principles and all of this, tried to share. So that's at least trying. I only fail if I stop trying. And how's my life better? You don't have enough time, or we don't have enough time to tell you how much better it is. Okay, step 3, tap it into that power of choice, the self-efficacy that I do have power of things. I'm just seemingly powerless. All of this thing is that first line in the big book, to recover from a seemingly powerless state of mind and body. Yeah, that's taking back the power that I had given to other people. really it was in the fourth step initially, and over the years of use of the fourth step that I begin to recognize more and more how I give power to other people, that they can push my buttons, or I've become overly reliant on them. And, I'm just surrendering, just as I did to alcohol. I'm reacting rather than responding to situations. So I make a daily decision to turn my will and my life over to this 12-step process and development of the inner sources they help me find and follow. Like the recovery capital we heard about here near this room earlier. Man, that was a wonderful talk. That's one of the best things in presentations. Well, why is it so wonderful for me? Because it seems to underline and say amen to the stuff that I believe and I'm feeling and trying to live. So how am I executing how am I executing my plans? Well, plans for the day, plan for the kind of person that my higher self, my higher power would have me be. Hey, do I recognize and respect my limits? Man, boundaries, we heard about that earlier. I've had a horrible problem with boundaries, but I'm much better today because practice makes progress. In practicing and teaching people how to treat me, if I put up with people abusing me one way or another or ignoring me, it's my fault. And I tend to take that power back, and there are many ways to do that. Am I judging myself on past habits and reactions? Sometimes when I'd have an adrenaline rush or whatever about something, or find myself reacting to somebody, it's because I realize that it's triggering some sort of thing in the past. And I've always had this question, I don't know for how many years, when I get that adrenaline rush or that impulse to lash out that usually comes along with it, I ask myself that simple question: what does hurt or threaten? Pocketbook, self-esteem, ambition, relationship, security, or feelings? And that's usually when I recognize, 20 years ago, I would have been really vulnerable in those areas, but I'm not today. I'm much more resilient. I'm much more in charge of my own responses than I was then. So, am I still, is my sobriety still my priority, or is sobriety losing its priority? Well, I don't know that it ever has. I did change the slip thing to spirituality loses its priority with my definition of spirituality. For me, it involves my attitudes, my emotions, my ideas, my opinions, my understandings, my behaviors. Now, I was doing that, the A-E-I-O-U, as a way to try to cover things so I don't forget them. And that will come in here again. Okay, in that 60 to 63, leading up to the third step prayer, I learned with the first co-sponsor I had to underline words in there that I related to, and that's some of these: the denial, the self-doubt, dependence, self-centeredness, so forth. And then I found over the years that when I'm hearing other things and reading other things, I began to identify other things that I call character weaknesses or common character weaknesses. And, I'm still adding, that's still not comprehensive, but the things I need to watch out for. But also in that, we found that there was another column, and that's some of the strengths. I wasn't 99% messed up and weak. I had some strengths. I had good motives. I had a certain amount of idealism, virtues, kind, generous, and considerate. Other times I was mean, egotistical, and demanding. Sorry, I quote the book so much, but it's it's influenced me. Okay, moving on. And then, what do I do with that prayer? When I came in, I could just put in an extra O in that God word, and good, and know that I was talking to that same presence that spoke to me the morning after my last drunk. It says, if you drink again, you're going to die. And so that is the anchor for me, that higher, what I call inner wisdom today, but I call it inner wisdom, love, compassion, and protection. if there's anything that AA has taught me to do, is to be self-protective, gave me permission to be self-protective. I wasn't early on because I was too much of a people pleaser. I wanted everybody to love me, and I put up with the stuff that they dish out, and got me in trouble. But anyway, I offer myself to you and this 12-step process to build with me and to do with me as it will, relieving the bondage to self-limiting and self-defeating attitudes, emotions, ideas, opinions, understandings, beliefs, and behavior. So there it is. That stand in the way of my usefulness, happiness, joy, and freedom. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help with the power, the love, and the way of life available to all who are willing to accept, begin, and continue this work. That's me. If that works for anybody else, that's fine. But that's the example that's kept me sober 40 years. Which is 14,609 days, one day at a time. Okay, the fourth step, fact-finding process, learning to look in the mirror, the power of reflection, and remembering that searching moral inventory. Honest, moral means honest. It's an honest inventory I need to take of myself, my thoughts, beliefs, and so forth. So I ask myself, I try to shape a sane and sound ideal for my future relationships. That's the big bottom line for me that brings about change, is getting that description of what that higher self wants me to be, what kind of person. What is hurt or threatened is still an important question. What am I running from? What am I still hiding? I was quite a few years before I recognized that most of my addictions, all of my addictions were part of my running for myself, running from my feelings, running from my thoughts, running from responsibility. So I'm continuing, hopefully, to learn from my past and present experiences, reactions, and responses. I'm racing through this. The grudge list is built as a result of working with other people, the thing I need to watch out with, the kinds of people, institutions, and principles. I look at principles exactly the way I was told. Bill substituted the word principles for steps off and on and used them interchangeably, so that's what I need to watch out. Do I not want to tell my whole life story to another person in step 5? Do I not want to continue to pray for the knowledge of my higher self's will for my life and the power to carry that? Do I want to help others? I wasn't altruistic enough at the beginning. I was too involved in the lower deficiency needs on Maslow's scale to be thinking about giving back and doing anything. And I have to remember that when I'm working with other people, not everybody's there yet. So those weaknesses, I got them in alphabetical order because I still have to watch out for those. And that's but here we sort them out to the strengths that I see and I look for to grow in. I found a list of possible fears because when my first therapist asked me, what are you afraid of? I had no idea. When Roger asked me what I was afraid of, my second sponsor, he used that question anytime I was upset and was thinking about acting out in some way. He'd say, what is it you don't want to talk about today? What is it you're afraid of? And that got me started. Okay, take away my fear and show me what you would have me be and do differently. I still use that when I get that. Well, I've used it for years. Move on to relationships. Oh, the thing is, I've discovered that Bill really talks about 5 columns, not 3, not 4. The 5th one is what could I do instead? That's up in the sex inventory, relationship inventory. We ask that question and he says, so we treat our sex problems the way we do every other problem. Well, he didn't have us think about doing those things with our other problems, so that's become a part of the process. I was working with domestic violence perpetrators years ago. And one time we were looking, they were really concerned about getting their children back and their family back. And so we did a thing of brainstorming, what do children need? And we went through this list of wonderful things. The following week, I just said, well, let's talk about what people need. What do we need and others need? And we started the list. And somebody said, is the last list on the other side of the board? And guess what? Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. This helps me to recognize a kind of ideal the person that I'd be happy with. I'd want to feel good about myself at the end of the day and look to see how am I doing as far as nurturing and being open-minded and optimistic and so forth. So that's a valuable list for me. A lot of these things are on the other handout too. Whatever my ideal turns out to be, I must be willing to grow toward it. And that's still what's important. Fifth, for me, telling my whole life story to the best of my ability, as often wherever I can, withholding nothing, is still what the fifth step is about. It's not, I use the fourth step, preparation for confession and absolution or reconciliation or penitent, whatever they want to call it. But so I hear myself telling these important things. So am I practicing honesty with myself and others? Am I keeping any secrets? Am I open and honest with at least one other person? And have I found that person? That isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. And especially somebody who would take, 3 or 4, 2 or 3 hour sessions for me to go through my many years of life and life lessons. I asked myself, well, this sixth step is I become willing to let go of anything and everything holding me back. And am I convinced that certain human weaknesses, advances can't hold me back? When I hear them in other people say, I better watch out for that. Am I watching out for shifting to other addictions? That's another topic. I know that every addiction that I've had, to food, to nicotine, to sex, sugar especially, to reading, to study, were distractions from what's going inside of me. Heard somebody say years ago, we're addicted to distractions. Bingo, I related that. It could be TV, it could be video games, it could be anything. Okay, am I decisive in letting go and saying no to old knee-jerk reactions? And I use whatever personal power and resources I find to help me confront self-limiting liabilities and offenses when they crop up. I know how to say no to all those things, so that's important. Seventh step decision or discipline is, innermost self. Am I now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad? I ask that you now remove from me every character weakness and defense which stands in the way of my usefulness, happiness, joy, and freedom. As I go out from here, may I find the strength I need to stay on this path. Of course, I used to use the big book version of those things for many years when I was pretending to believe, well, passing is, hiding out in the closet as far as what I believe. Eighth, step, this is so important, continuing to list the persons I've harmed who are willing to make things right. But I need to ask myself these questions to see if I'm willing to make restitution or amends, compensation for loss or injury to those I've harmed. Making direct amends, well, I didn't understand what amends meant, and I'm not sure I really, legally I do, but I've learned to make things right with all I've harmed wherever possible, except to do so when it would injure them or others. And can I make or plan to make restitution today without opening old wounds or causing additional harm? Now, some of these questions here came from other people, with 3 months, 2 years, 28 years, who'd never done the steps, and they, so this group helped me to do what I couldn't do by myself. I look at, that 4 through 9, from page 63 to 83, really helps me that's what the house cleaning process is all about. And that's promise we will not mourn the loss of the past and we shut the door on it, because the 1939 dictionary gives a definition for regret. That's it. Mourn the loss of, poignantly miss, not I'm sorry. Tapping into the powers of mindfulness, reminder and repetition. Am I being mindfully attentive to my word and actions? Do I review my list of common weaknesses and defenses most days? Have I become comfortable with promptly admitting when I'm wrong? I love that 10th step exactly the way it is, except it has to be I, not we. So sponsee said to me about that step, I know it says, continue to take personal inventory when we were wrong, but he said maybe we should do it continuously. And this whole process of the asking ourselves those questions, we know an apology, insight, so forth. Making review and ask what corrective measures should be taken. That's the, So, a lot of this is really, for me, is about using the brains evolution gave me. If that's what G-O-D is or good is, it's evolution that gave us this capacity to use it, and so I can grow in awareness, understanding, and effectiveness. And these are 3 resources, non-AA, that I love because they help to bring me into the present, so forth, and Eckhart Tolle and so forth. Tapping into the power of intention, that's that plan for the day. How am I doing with that? Upon awakening, morning practice of planning the day, writing the list. I don't know how many years I was sober before I started writing down things that I would forget in 5 minutes, but I did. I'm writing out a plan for most days and trying to follow it. Do I feel good? It feels great, actually, to check things off as I go through the day. And does this practice help me feel better about the person I am and have become? More quotes. All successful men and women have a plan. Experience the best teacher? No, it's the only teacher. That's my experience. For me, on awakening, we know that. Thinking about our day, we may face indecisions. We know what to do. We do not struggle. That's a new one. That's an important one. And how I conclude the day, the period of meditation, ask especially that I'm thinking will be freed from self-will. We are alcoholics are undisciplined, therefore we let this process, discipline in the simple way just outlined, is still important to me. But this is not all. There's action and more action, and it isn't faith, it's hope. I think there's so much wisdom in the literature that I can continue to use, and that's so I can see if I'm making progress, and that's just sort of a review, and I'm sorry it went, this is it. Will it make me happy? For how long? Will I feel good about myself if I do this or say that or this? So bottles are only a symptom. Working with others, I love that chapter because it gives some really good suggestions about being open and tolerant and not shoving my way on anybody else. All I have a right to talk about is how it works for me. And that's the big thing. Use what you can to unto yourself be true. So thank you for your patience with me, and stay sober.
This talk was recorded at the Toronto Marriott Eaton Centre. For more information and more recordings, visit seculara.org.